All right. So
Recording.
today I am with Marvin and Corey. Say hi, guys.
Yeah, what's going on,
Yo,
guys?
hello YouTube.
So I haven't posted too many political videos on the channel, but I've been wanting to do fucking stupid ass, woke ass content for a while now. But I'm here with Corey and Marvin. Like I said, where would you guys identify yourself as far as the political spectrum goes?
I don't know. I'm not too typically into right, left, or central, or Democrat or Republican. I see something I like, I agree with it, or I don't. So I guess that would technically put me, I guess, like center. Probably center, closer to maybe right.
I would say the same. I've from our talks that we've had before, I would say that's not too far off. Marvin, what about you?
I would like 100% agree with Corey.
Okay, well,
I feel like I have a more nuanced view of things, but I do feel like in most topics, I think I would lean closer to the right.
okay, well, I, I mean, I've from the videos that I've uploaded that have gotten freaking 40% like ratings. I'm very very far
Far
left.
left.
So,
Too far gone.
I'm just gonna be. If you guys have seen the Jubilee videos where they do like one liberal versus 20 conservatives and shit like that. I'm just gonna come up with a little like statement off the top of my head, and we will all take turns just sharing our thoughts on what I said, and just discuss from there. So without further ado, are you guys ready?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
All right. So we're
Yep.
gonna start off with a what I would say is a pretty big one. Um, Trump is extremely bad for the country.
Extremely bad.
Extremely bad.
Trump is extremely bad for the country.
Yeah.
Let Corey go first. Can you handle that? What about
I'm
after?
trying to think. Extreme. I guess I would disagree with you on the premise of extremely bad. I don't necessarily think he's like the greatest president we've had, right? But I wouldn't I wouldn't say he's done some things I like, and he's done some things that I don't like. So I could concede that he's bad, but I can't concede that he's extremely bad.
Do you think he currently? We'll ignore the first administration. We can or the first term. We can talk about that later. But do you think currently he's doing more harm than good?
Currently, do I think he's doing more harm than good? Um, to make it interesting, I could say yes,
Okay.
and I believe I could say yes in terms of other countries' perceptions of the U.S. and how, like, when he got elected and started doing a bunch of stuff, it's like, you hear on the internet that now a bunch of these countries are trying to create new treaties,
Yeah.
new trade agreements, without the U.S. involved to try to cut the U.S. out of stuff. And I think that shows a lack of, maybe the word is trust, and a lack of confidence in the U.S., and that the U.S. will continue to be doing what it has been for the last, like 20 years or so.
Right.
So
Right.
I think in terms, I could say that his second term has been extremely bad in the terms of, perception, the U.S.'s perception of others of the U.S. Like, there's going into, the specifics of what he's done. I don't know all of it. The I think the bigger one I know is the deportation of people. I
Right.
don't disagree with that, and I'll say it. I'll say it. I really don't disagree with that. I know he's done that. And the other thing would be the tariffs, right?
Yes. Yes.
The blanket tariffs, and we've kind of spoke about this. I think we actually were all here in addition with Chris.
I'm pretty
The
sure you
last time
agreed
we
with me
spoke about the
that
tariffs,
blanket tariffs are not a good
they
idea.
were bad. Blanket, yeah, and I think we all literally, when it was one giant circle jerk of everyone saying that
We're not
blanket
too shy
tariffs are
to circle
bad.
jerks around here.
Yeah, that would be homophobic. We're not homophobic, I promise.
All right. Anything else
But
you want to
it
add,
was
Corey?
Just to finish off what I was saying, it was kind of just one mass circle jerk of us saying that
Yeah.
blanket tariffs are bad. Targeted tariffs can be useful, and the reason we cited that they could be useful was the fact that it can get it can incentivize stuff to be starting to be made locally. But when you blanket tariff everyone
That's not.
and you just raise the tariffs really high, no one has any time to prepare. And the one thing is like the tariff stuff could work out, but that's not a 4 or 5 or 6 year plan. We're talking like a 20, 30,
Decades,
40 year
yeah.
plan. Where yeah, this is a plan that would require decades and the consequent presidents, all of them, to pretty much either leave the plan alone or add to it. And if even a single one, decides that they don't want to, they could really stop the plan by themselves, which would effectively make everything for nothing. So I think it's relative. The tariffs are kind of a high risk, high reward type of strategy. But even then, like I said, the blanket tariffs necessarily aren't probably the smart.
I would almost push back on saying that there's. I know
Yeah.
last time we spoke, I didn't. I don't think I took like a solid stance on if it would work in the long run. I'm actually gonna push back and say that if you think about it, even if they do work and we bring back American like industry plants and stuff and manufacturing like spaces to America, these companies aren't gonna want to hire American workers. They're still gonna want to like import workers that are willing to take like lesser pay. At least there's like a shit ton of people in foreign countries who would be willing to take like low pay for the opportunity to like stay in America. And so I don't think it would bring back jobs. I think yeah, it would bring back like the actual process of manufacturing, but like the whole idea of like we'll still have a foreign work source making most of our goods for us. It wouldn't really it kind of just shifts the area, not like the workforce.
Yeah, I see what you're saying,
And I feel like
and I think that
most
that's possible.
I feel like most people, like most Americans, wouldn't want to do like a like assembly line, sit down, fucking 12 hours a day, lose a couple fingers, you
Well,
know.
so for no, I see what you're saying. To talk about that last point first, I think that the Americans wouldn't want to do it has to be due to the fact that we've really pushed for college degrees. We've kind of pushed for college degrees, and I don't. I'm trying to think of a proper word. So I'll just say the one that came to my head. There's almost like a disdain for not call it for jobs that don't require college education, like trades. Trades you could it's effectively like college just for a more hands-on career, and they take about 2 years to do, which is just effectively just an associate's.
Hmm.
Or you could even do apprenticeships. In that case, they'll pay you as you get hands-on experience. But those aren't advertised nearly as much as college. And pretty much anyone our age can really remember the fact that your parents told you to go to college. Now, what do you want to be when you grow up, and what kind of college degree you gonna get? I feel like most people's parents push them to college, to higher education, and I think that kind of left a it left people believing that the more trades and more hands-on type of jobs are like lesser than.
That's true.
And to and to talk, so I feel like, I guess, to finish off that point, to I believe, if we, because I don't necessarily agree that college is super important to most people. I feel like the whole, you don't need a college degree to do most things. In my personal opinion, most of that can be done through just actually getting the skills, right? So like for STEM, for instance, yeah, you definitely need a degree. I would prefer my doctor to be an actual doctor. I would prefer the guys in the nuclear power plant to actually know some calculus.
All right, all right.
So so it's like for certain jobs, yes, a STEM degree would be important, but it's like, realistically, I'm not sure how a liberal arts degree, or, a
Philosophy
degree,
degree.
a philosophy degree, or a degree in understanding the Constitution That is actually a real degree because I'm
Understanding
a
the
fire
Constitution.
captain. It was something like that. Something had to do with the Constitution, and
That's
I know that that's a thing because a fire captain. And for those of you who don't know, a fire captain is a very very high firefighter position. He actually told me he had a degree in that, and he said that that was probably the most useless thing he's ever done in his life. So there are definitely degrees that are not very useful, yet people are still getting them when they don't necessarily need to, and then that compounds with the fact that jobs are saying, oh well, you need a degree to do this. Well, no, technically you don't, right? There are people in that job who are doing that job right now that I guarantee don't have a degree, and that job, that whole field hasn't collapsed, right? So clearly, you don't need one, but because employers are pushing them, and because parents are pushing them, and people are pushing them, you're not really left with a choice. And I believe that if for people to want to work factory jobs, which back in the day weren't bad jobs, you could have the traditional, family with that. You could have, a nice house, potentially a boat, a wife, two kids. You'd be able to function on that type of in income if you weren't in like a low income area. You'd be relatively well off if you had a factory job. So to get people to want to work a factory job, you kind of have to shift the mindset back to trades, and factory jobs aren't bad.
Well, that also kind of pushes back into what I was saying. I don't think that these companies would be willing to pay enough to have like a survivable wage anymore now that they've been so used to paying like fucking $3 a day to people in foreign countries. And even if they did like abide by like federal standards for minimum wage or even higher, because most people would be hard stuck to get a job for $7 when you can get a job for like 11 or $12 in the same state. I feel like forcing our like production lines to adhere to a much higher minimum wage than what they're used to paying would inevitably cause the price of goods to go up.
Yeah, and I could see that. I could definitely see how it would cause the cost of goods to go up. And then I actually wanted to talk about that one next. Um, to be honest, if with how Trump has been functioning, and I doubt this is gonna continue past his presidency. I highly doubt the mass deportations like this, unless someone like JD
Oh
Vance
boy,
gets
the
elected.
Pope killer.
I yeah, the man who assassinated the Pope. I doubt unless he gets elected, I really do doubt that this type of deportation will continue. So but I do feel like, let's just say it does continue with JD Vance or something like that. I really doubt that companies are gonna try to do that, and I think that's kind of it's interesting. I kind of find it a bit interesting because you're right. The companies they don't want to have their profit. What's the word? Profit margins. So what is it? Decrease, right,
Decrease.
Marvin?
Yeah, it's decrease.
Decrease. They don't want to have their profit margins decrease by hiring American workers because they'll be making less money. So I that is like that's actually one of the, like, I think the biggest concerns. And to be honest, other than, because here's my thing, right? Companies are so used to increasing profit margins, right? We've had McDonald's, right, since like the 50s. Their profits have been going up and up and up, and there's only so many people you can give a Big Mac to. Eventually they're gonna reach the maximum amount of places. They're gonna, like, their stuff will plateau eventually.
Right.
You can't have a entity that constantly increases its profits, because that's coming at the cost of it's more and more expensive, or you getting more and more people. But eventually, because
Everyone's
it's like
gonna
India,
be
right,
done with
right? Yeah,
McDonald's.
it's like, yeah, it's almost like, maybe a better example would be like Apple. Apple really wants to get into India because India is like, what, the largest, highest population country on the planet. So it's like, if they get into India, their profits are gonna go way up because they've just unlocked like several billion people, or like a billion people just by themselves. So so it's like it's gonna go up and then it's gonna stagnate again
Hmm.
if they saturated India. So it's like there's only so many people you can sell an iPhone to, one time. Then you got to get them on and then you obviously can get people on like buying the next newest thing, but that's
That's a little
something.
harder in different
But
countries though. It's because we people in like third world nations like India won't have the ability to purchase like
yeah,
every
but
new generation of iPhone or.
yeah, but my like the point I want to try to get at is just the fact that eventually, no matter the company, especially with these larger ones, they're gonna reach kind of a plateau where they're not really increasing all that much. And I think the companies they know that they're just trying to extend the date it happens as far as they can. So I think that you would have to in order to stop them from doing that. I think the only way is to again it's restrict companies and incentivize them to hire
Mm.
American workers because that's really what this is coming down to. It's keeping people out of the country so that way they don't take the jobs once they're here, and then keeping the companies actually wanting to stay in the country and employ the workers. And as for the increasing profit margins, to be honest, not the decreasing profit margins of employing American workers, I really don't think there's much you could do about that. Yeah, as it's just kind of like if you're gonna employ Americans, it's just kind of gonna go up. I don't think there's really a way unless you can convince the company to somehow take a
But
cut. I mean, to take a
fucking
hit,
good
to
luck with
take a
that.
hit. Yeah, and I'm like I'm pretty sure pigs would fly before that,
Yeah.
unless the government forces them to take
But
a hit.
then hold on
But
before I
that's that's
before
that's its own thing.
before I say anything about like forcing like government like stepping in to Marvin, do you have anything you would want to say about how you feel about at least Trump's second term, ignoring his first term for now?
I mean, I kind of kind of embarrassed to say, but Corey's been like spitting, and there's nothing much that I could add other than like my personal opinion.
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like, oh,
I'll continue.
I feel like I think us being in California. Well, first of all, to answer the question, I don't think it's extremely bad. I don't think his term's been going extremely bad. Um, I think if it was extremely bad, we'd be like in a like terrible crisis or some crazy ass shit happens. The closest we ever got to that was for sure Vance killing the Pope. But I mean, it's really mixed, and it's kind of hard to say because to me, I perceive it as bad. But I think one thing that low key that I've always like never really thought about that I'll like remember every once in a while is that like we live in California, bro.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
obviously
Just
everything's
doxing
gonna be
us.
really like left swing or left swinging. It's gonna everything we consume, all the most of the media that we consume, unless we have one of those things where it tells you that it's like made for the left or made for the right or central,
Yeah, yeah.
like it's probably gonna be more leaning towards the left than it is the right. So I think just by that, I'm pretty sure that I would perceive him to be worse than he actually is. I feel like a lot of people are always quick to say bad things about him and never focus on any of the things that he did good. I'm not saying that, there is stuff. I'm pretty sure, there has to be something good that he did out there. It's just that I would never know. I would always know like 100 bad things before I find out about one good thing.
Mm. I mean,
But like, yeah, the tariff side as a whole does not help. And then the deportation, dude, that shit's actually really scary, and I think it's sad too. Um, because I mean, at the end of the day, bro, like you have laws and you have to abide by the laws.
right,
Like
right.
it's just as simple. Of course, the system, it might be shit, and that's just that's the short end of the stick. Unfortunately, things are the way they are, and at this moment in time, it's very hard to change things when they're like pretty much set in stone.
I wanna.
I will say that, or what were you gonna say? What were
No,
you
no,
gonna say?
finish. You can finish. You can finish.
I was just gonna finish my thought by saying it does suck though, because like personally, I feel like the whole raids as a whole
Mm-mm.
doesn't accomplish what the intended goal was. I feel like his whole thing was like, oh, okay, we need to get illegal aliens, illegal immigrants out of the country because they're bringing in their problems, they're bringing in their drug dealing. When I feel like 99% of the people who are deported are, you know, they work, they pay taxes, they some of them, dude, it's so sad. Some of them even own like businesses and shit.
Yeah, a lot of them have been here for like
And
20, 30 years and they're getting fucking sent
mhm.
back. They've built their life here. But I was gonna add to move into the discussion of deportation. Funnily enough, I've been thinking as more of I thought as the more I've thought about it, the more I've the more I've kind of like when he first started doing it, I was like, no, I don't think we should be deporting anyone. I'm actually switching more towards, yeah, you can. It's fine if you want to deport people. It's fine. I mean, I have ideological disputes with it, but I think it's fine to deport them if you go about it the right way. But my problem is now he is currently doing it like completely incorrectly. I mean, I'm sure both of you have seen like people saying like, "Oh, illegal immigrants aren't getting due process," which I mean, because they're not. They're especially what's his name, Kelmar something something, the guy who got sent to the El Salvadorian prison,
Oh yeah,
the without
I
the
heard about
innocent
that.
guy.
the what?
Yeah,
Yeah,
are we
that
talking about the
he
innocent
was
one?
the innocent. Yeah, he was innocent.
Yeah.
Well, innocent. I think he might have had like some. So I'm not sure. I think he might have some charges, but they tried to tie him to being like part of MS-13, which it wasn't proven at
Right.
all, right? But it's like I think that sets a very bad precedent for the rest of not even just like people on visas, people on vacation, or like people like not non-citizens but like U.S. residents. I think it sets a very scary precedent for them because like if he's not safe, he's not getting due process, he's not gonna get a trial or like to plead his case, and they're not even gonna try to get him back. Like, what's protecting them, you know?
Mhm. I would like to just say, I think I think while it does set a bad precedent, I think it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for what I'm about to say, but I think and I really do think that people are gonna see that and they're gonna be scared. But it's the truth is he was an acceptable casualty. He did nothing wrong. He was just kind of caught in the crossfire, and his I'll say death. Obviously, he's not dead. I mean, he might
Yeah.
be, but I'll just say, his death in all of this is just an unfortunate event, and he was caught in the crossfire, and the truth is that's kind of acceptable to most people, I feel like, because you can never have like mass change and everything go completely right all the time.
Right, but
So it's like you have I'm trying to think of like big like societal changes or like big changes in general. But like the idea is that you're never gonna have a movement, you're never gonna have any change that doesn't get one person killed. And it's like the like people, well, I guess I can maybe speak on like the civil rights maybe, where you know you had people constantly dying for random things, right? You had people getting hosed down with water hoses, and that's scary. But it's like the truth is that people to some extent were willing to let that happen in order to continue to change.
I would say that
I'm
that's
trying to think.
not a very. I would say that, and to use the civil rights, he's kind of like on the opposite end of it, where the people who were getting like killed or harassed or like sprayed down or like even arrested and beat were they were willing, they knew the risk of like choosing to fight for civil rights. Whereas this guy was just he was just a guy, you know? He was
I
unwilling.
wanna say real quick that I was talking about just that time frame in general, not necessarily like all that stuff was happening definitely to protesters, but I'm also talking about people who just so happened to be in the areas during the protests when that stuff happened, or just randomly, on how do I, yeah, I didn't want to particularly use that example, but like that, like to be hosed down, to be arrested and beaten, that stuff isn't just for the protesters. That was happening to people who were suspected of being protesters, or they were just in the area when it happened, or suspects, right? So it's like, and to even get rid of that example and to just speak in a generalization, people are willing to accept casualties within a certain range in order for something that they want to happen. So, and that's kind of like the unfortunate thing, but like him doing that is definitely scary. Let's be realistic. Most people aren't gonna be like unless there's something big, right, that targets resident non-Americans, or residents in U.S. residents. There we go. The likelihood of people just being picked up for absolutely no reason is fairly low.
I mean, for now
For
though.
a resident, yeah, well, yeah, for now, right? But that was my point, was unless something big again happens, the likelihood of people just being randomly picked up off the street and are told to pack your things and get out is very, very unlikely.
Mm,
Because because again, he was the reason he was taken was because he was suspected of being something, of an MS-13 member, and he was, suspected of being an illegal immigrant. If a U.S. resident isn't suspected of being a gang member, if they're not suspected of being a terrorist, if they're not suspected of being anyone but a normal person, what do you think the likelihood of them being just randomly selected out of the crowd and sent back to their home country is going to be?
but the
I would wager
problem,
it's probably not going to be very
the
high.
problem then is that, well, one, yeah, if someone's not like, suspected of crimes, they won't be like, they probably won't just be grabbed at random. But the problem then is, like, how do you? I've heard this before, but the problem with this like idea of not giving setting the precedent of not giving people we want to deport due process to prove themselves as innocent, or of having legal justification for being in the country, is then like, how do you prove that you are meant to be here? If ICE just says, hey, we're sending you here, you're not going to get a chance to go to trial to prove that you're meant to be here, and then you just get deported. That's my main like issue with this whole situation, is that him being sent over without due process can, I don't think that, I think that this current administration would be willing to deport people without like proof of their like non-residence, or without proof of them being illegal immigrants. I think that that's something that they would definitely do.
How would you how would you prove if someone's an illegal immigrant or not?
That's the point. They're not allowing people. Well, you can't prove that you're, I guess you can't technically prove you're an illegal immigrant if you don't have documentation. But by sending him back without even allowing him the chance to prove that maybe he did have documentation, maybe he didn't, it sets the precedent that at random people can be chosen and deported. And it's kind of hard to do that. Like, I've seen a lot of people, like, my, not to not to rag on my dad or my other, but I've seen like my family members be like, they'll just see like a group of like Mexican people just chilling and be like, oh my god, these illegals. But like, they have no evidence that they're illegal. They're just like selecting them based off of racial profiling and assuming, yeah, they're probably not American. This is why the situation is so like, is very like worrying for like just average people. It's scary to try to think that like at any time, not yet, of course, it hasn't happened en masse yet, but there is, now that we see that he is not backing down on his mistake he made, he is continuing to justify his actions. He will, like, you're not guaranteed your security, you know.
I mean, I feel like I've been seeing what you've been trying to say this entire time, but I really, my question is, how exactly, again, if you're not suspected of being anything, if you've been a U.S. resident this entire time, if you're not suspected of absolutely nothing, you're suspected of absolutely nothing, you're a U.S. resident, a non-citizen, why exactly would you think he would be picked up at random?
I mean, they're
It's
looking
like
for people.
it's to me, because to me, right? Because to me, it seems like unfounded paranoia. You're scared you're gonna be picked up for why?
Well,
If
we've
you're a U.S.
also.
resident and you're here legally and you're not a gang member, you're not a terrorist, you're here, let's just say for work or something, and you suspect that you're gonna be, like what for what grounds do you have that fear that you're gonna be sent home?
Oh, we've seen this before, in American history with back in like the 40s with the red. Wait, Marvin, do you have anything to add before we
Red
continue?
Scare.
Low key, not to add, but to clarify, what are you guys' argument like essentially?
I'm saying that it
Give
like
me like
I'm saying that it's setting a very like scary precedent just for like people like non U.S. citizen residents or like people on like work visa or green card. It sets a very scary precedent that at any time they can be deported without the ability to properly defend themselves to prove that they have the legal right to be here.
and Corey, you don't agree?
And no, I agree. My whole argument was it can be effectively summed up to it's not that deep.
I mean, not yet though.
It's
That's the thing. Like as I was gonna
it's just
say.
it's like not yet, but
Not yet. I thought it already was.
Well, it's not happening like en masse. I don't think. I'm not sure actually, but I was saying like I think that this current administration was so like as well as the rhetoric of get rid of all of the illegals can definitely lead to like more like people who are meant to be here being sent away. And as I was gonna say, we've seen it with the
Oh,
Red Scare in the 40s, where like you could just if you didn't like somebody, or you could just accuse them of being communist, and they would actually look into them. They would look into if they had like communist ideals, and if they did, they would get punished. But now it's like, what's to stop me from reporting like a bunch of people that I see as illegals, and if they don't receive due process, there's a good chance that they would get deported.
and I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's not gonna be there's definitely like in order to get all this mass portation done, there's definitely the process is definitely being expedited. But I very highly doubt you could just point to some random Hispanic guy and say immigrant, and then him be whisked away the next day with absolutely, you know, no repercussions. Because again, if this guy was an actual U.S. citizen and has all the documentation, all the history, the family history to prove it, do you really think he's going to be whisked away? Like the answer is
But he's
simply
not.
no.
If they're not given the chance to show their documentation in court or to the, that's the thing. They're not being. This sets the precedent of do not like let them defend themselves. If they're accused of being an illegal, they will be sent back.
Let me clarify. Where in the process are you talking about they're not having due process? Are you talking about for the entire thing? Because to me, what it sounds like you're trying to say is that if you point out a Hispanic guy, say immigrant, ICE and the government's going to do absolutely no research into the person and they're just going to grab them. Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, they'd probably do a little bit of research. I don't think that they'd just listen off to one guy, but I wouldn't be too surprised if I did report someone that would cause them to be like looked into and seriously considered for deportation.
Well, yeah, they're going to be if they fit the profile of right.
But
So
what's fitting the profile of an
here's the
illegal
thing. Here's
immigrant,
the
though?
thing, and that's exactly what I was about to say. There's kind of so like when we're looking at this, we're talking about mostly it's like people from like El Salvador and stuff like that. Latin Americans, right? Where if someone fits the bill of looking like and this is kind of the unfortunate point where like I feel like I have to say there's definitely some racial profiling
Right, exactly.
going on. If someone fits the bill of a Latin American, yeah, they're absolutely going to be looked into. Like that's not a question. But I also feel like if you pointing the finger at anyone in particular, they would also be looked into, but they're not going to be looked into nearly as heavily, at least I think so, as just someone who fits the type of bill they're looking for. And it's like, if going back to the Mexican, going back to the Hispanic guy, right? Example. You point to a guy, he's Hispanic, and they start looking into him. A preliminary search would tell you that he's been here since, kindergarten. He's gone here since kindergarten. He's been all the way here through high school. Let's just say he didn't go to college. All right, he has work experience here as well. And let's say, okay, no, well, maybe he was born here, but what about his parents? You look into his parents, you know, their dates go back to also all the way to, let's just say they were, elementary school. Like it doesn't take more than a couple inquiries to figure out if someone is an illegal immigrant or not by simply looking at them and looking at their parents. Because if their parents don't have any history of any level of education here, let's just say maybe aside from college, where they just randomly popped up, one day, likelihood is, yeah, they're if they don't have any other history at all prior to, I don't know, let's just use the 2000s, right? Let's say the year is 2040. If this guy's parents don't have any history prior to the year 2000, and all of a sudden in 2003 they just showed up and got a job in, let's say, 2004, and let's say they even went to college in 2016, like, what do you think the likelihood of they immigrated here? I would say it's fairly high since they don't have any history. But if they have history prior to the year 2000, do you really think that they immigrated? Probably not, especially if they have, information from schooling, because your public school records are kept. So if they have gone to public school, any school, that would be known. So it doesn't take more than a couple of inquiries to figure out if someone is illegal or not. So I think simply pointing the finger at someone isn't going to cause them to be unjustly whisked away. And I really do feel like that there was some profiling going on for his case, because he was generally just whisked away. And I think the moment they saw that he definitely didn't have any history here prior to, I don't know, let's just say 2016, then they just were like, all right, let's just take him. So there was definitely an expedition, and there was definitely, the process for him was definitely expedited, but that's not going to be the case for everyone.
How would you guys feel if you knew that deporting Kilmar, Trump violated the Supreme Court, like just flat out did not listen to their orders to not do it. He just did it anyways. How does that make you guys feel?
I mean, did they rule that he was to be kept, or the way he was to be kept until they could figure out if he could be deported or not?
I think it was that if he were to be deported, okay. For context, the backstory is that his mom was targeted by gangs in El Salvador, and I think she didn't want to pay protection money to them, so they said they would kill her son, which was Kilmar, right? So I think that's why he was here. The court said if you send him back, there is severe threat to his life, and it was like a completely unanimous decision not to send him back, and they still sent him back anyways.
So, but I thought the Supreme Court, their job was to rule on whether stuff was constitutional or not.
I'm not sure exactly what their job is. Well, I think I would need to look into that more.
Because if that's the case, then their whole justification
we
for
can-
no, you can't deport the guy is simply because his life is at risk. I don't, and that's, and this, to be fair, that's important, but that's simply not enough reason to not deport someone who shouldn't have been here in the first place. Regardless of the threat to his life or not.
It says that using the freaking AI overview, so take it with a grain of salt. Says that the Supreme Court can refute deportation cases and issues ruling on the legality of deportations.
So they didn't deem it illegal. They just said don't do it because it's a threat to his life.
Well, doesn't that still not sound very good?
Well,
It might not have been.
I mean, it doesn't sound good, but if it's all fair and game, it's again, it's really unfortunate. Like it really is. But the truth is, he's fair game if they didn't rule it illegally, that it's illegal. So it's fair game, asshole move. Yeah, absolutely, but it's fair game.
Okay. I was Marvin, do you have anything to add?
Um, I know, but like it was referring to like what you guys talked about before you asked that question, John.
What was that?
Hello?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Oh, I was gonna say yeah, not about the question you just asked, but what we were talking about before, of like how Corey was saying that basically like it ain't that deep.
I think
I
it's
think it is that deep because I think there's like I mean in anything there's like so many things that you need to know before you can make a decision, but I feel like here the two biggest like variables that I feel like you're overlooking is like time and like people have egos. I feel like, yeah, it's a very easy to do a simple inquiry and use deduction and reasoning in order to figure out, okay, are they more likely to have, came here legally, or, this shit add up. And I feel like the thing that you're forgetting, if the administration is trying to make an example and trying to put out, a certain image, um, those small inquiries on that big of a scale are gonna cost time and therefore money. And it's a lot easier to say like, oh, okay, they don't have their papers on them right now, and they're on their own, surrounded. Let's just round them up, and then that's it. I feel like that's one thing, and then two is ego. Obviously they're put in a position, and like any other job, they have to follow, a certain set of guidelines or responsibilities. So maybe, fuck it, if they have a quota, then they're not gonna give a fuck. If they don't have their papers on them right now, they're not gonna care to do a simple inquiry. They're gonna be like, oh, caught him with his pants down, all right, whatever, round him up.
Mhm.
And even if they're not like that, maybe there's no quota, maybe they're just, straight up power trip their dicks.
I'm pretty sure there is
And
a
they
quota
don't
do
give a
have to
fuck,
hit.
There's a quota,
exactly. I feel like there's a lot of things, and I feel like it really is that deep, because it's not. I think it is a thing where if you'd be like, oh hey, you just point out a Mexican, be like illegal immigrant. I think there is a way for them to be round up, or at least the police knock up on their door. And I feel like it really is a scare, because it's like, at least before, when they first started around, it was a huge scare. I don't know if you knew or you heard about, but I think one really sad thing is they were going rounding up the Mexicans that were, they'll be like posted up outside of Home Depot looking for work.
Oh
Yeah.
They were, yeah,
They got
they
them.
raided that. They raided the one. I
That's
think it was the
crazy.
one closer to you. I don't know if it's a Home Depot or a Lowe's.
no. Yeah.
Um,
I
but yeah,
haven't
they
looked
raided that a few
it
weeks
up.
ago, and I feel like that's the perfect example because, by law, maybe some of them there don't have papers, but at the end of the day, they're contributing in, as like a form of labor. They're not doing drugs, bruh. And who knows, maybe they have their own construction company. Maybe it's like they're not even like the minimum wage employees, bruh. Maybe they're selling a service to other people, helping people furnish their house. Anything with labor, bruh. Anything when somebody needs to outsource their labor, they're there, bruh. Like it's a
Right.
source of labor. I think it's at the end of the day, it's benefiting the economy, and it sucks because I think that's like the perfect example of like what is wrong with like the deportation system.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
But in like closing my thoughts, I think it is that deep, unfortunately.
No, I'm willing. So I am right. If Trump has taught me anything, it's to double down and never apologize. However, however, I am I am willing to concede and take a step back that I had forgot to include the first of all ego. And when I say ego, I'm referring more to Donald Trump's ego, and the fact that he wouldn't want to send people back even if he did made a mistake. And
Right.
two, the quota and the time that it would take for them to meet the quota, because I believe there is a quota and they're trying to get a certain amount of people out, before the end of his presidency. So I am willing to concede that I factored those in, but as Trump's taught me,
Don't back
do
down.
not don't back down, never apologize. And I'm not gonna back down from my point because I do believe that it's not that deep for the majority of now maybe illegals, right? It is that deep for them. I'm willing to concede, and I would like to note that when I'm talking about it was not that deep, I'm talking about it's not that deep for people like US residents and who have work visas and have their papers. For immigrants, for illegal immigrants, it is that deep. It is absolutely that deep because they are the demographic that's going to get
Yeah.
grabbed. Yeah, like, but like reason I said it's not that deep is because I believe you're trying to make it out as if a random normal U.S. resident who's here on a work visa, and I'll use this as the example of one of my in-laws, one of my uncle's in-laws, I believe. She's not technically an American. She met my uncle um, at night in a park, and she's from Germany. Like she's an actual German, and she's simply here because she has a job that brings her to America. And then she stayed here obviously because she met my uncle. So it's like had I and obviously she's now she's not really eligible to be snatched like that because she was married to my uncle. But like just taking about the fact that she wasn't, like if she wasn't, I highly doubt she would be snatched because she doesn't have any gang affiliations. She's here on a work visa, and she's been living here literally for like the past like 20 years. I really really can't see a world where well, I could definitely see a world, but I really don't think that anytime soon there's going to be people like her just snatched up and sent back to Germany just randomly.
Is she white?
I could technically I wouldn't classify her as white.
Does she have like pale skin?
No.
Yeah, I think I'm
No.
following your line of questioning, John. Yeah,
No,
I
she's
feel like
not.
as it sucks, like
She's
by
I would
law.
say she's relatively so here's the thing. Um she's brown enough that I didn't realize that she was an in-law until I got older. I just thought she was like someone from my mom's side of the family. I so she's brown enough that 6-year-old me simply thought we were related by blood.
I would say that even
So
then, like, I don't want to like make hasty generalizations, but because that we've decided to target certain immigrant groups from certain countries, even then I would agree that your cousin, you said cousin, right? Or what was
well,
it?
technically, she's not related to me
Well,
by
whatever
blood.
she
I
is.
just call her my cousin.
No,
It's
yeah.
simple.
I feel like I would agree that I wouldn't imagine her being sent back because she's simply just not the demographic they're looking to target. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a fear for, and to a point, I would say that currently it's not that deep, but I can imagine a world where it is. Have you heard that poem where it's like
You mean people can?
first they came for the socialists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist, and then they came for
Yeah,
the. It reminds me a
that's
lot of that,
actually I remember that. Yeah,
where it's like,
I see what you're saying, and I like I said before, there's definitely some racial profiling going on because I feel like, and I don't, you know, so I love Hispanics. I love my Hispanics.
Let's
Love
hear it.
them. I
Let's hear
love
it.
them. But well, no, that's it. I love them. But
Okay.
but here,
All right, guys.
here's the
Here's
thing.
the next one.
Here's the thing is I really like when maybe I should have specified when I say that there's some racial profiling going on. I mean, what I really meant was when people think of illegal immigrant, they think of Mexicans. They think of Mexicans and they think of people from South America. whether that's right or not, I'm not really here to comment on. But I personally, I don't think that is right because I'm pretty sure aren't like most immigrants like Chinese or something.
They're from all
But
over.
it's like from all over. But it's like when people think of illegal immigrant, they think
They think
like
of-
where did the slur border hopper or border
Yeah,
crosser
yeah,
come from? It's like they're thinking of Mexico. So like when I said that there's some racial profiling going on, what I really meant was they're simply looking for Hispanics. They're looking for Hispanics. They're looking for Latin Americans. They're looking for anyone who can be confused as those two. So it's like yes, they're gonna grab them first before anyone else, simply because that's who's in their crosshair. And like I said again, I can see I can very easily see a world where they try to just grab anyone for any reason. I just don't. I simply trying to. I don't think it's deep in the sense that we're not. I don't unless something really goes wrong, and I mean really really goes like stuff starts to fall apart. I don't see a world where people are going to begin to tolerate the taking of just random people for random reasons. I believe people are willing to accept this simply because they want immigrants out of the country.
I would actually.
And maybe they'll be willing to accept it, again, let's just say, to use my cousin's example, if, a bunch of Germans just started showing up here out of nowhere, be like, get them out of the country. But I simply feel like in a normal day-to-day society where people aren't trying to heavily push for a community to be, excommunicated from America, there's I don't see where a blatant so I'm looking for
Like targeting.
a blatant targeting, but more than that, it's a blatant violation of people's rights are going to simply go unnoticed and unanswered, because even now we're seeing people push back against that. We're seeing people who are absolutely pushing back against that. Even the Supreme Court was like, "Hey, bruh, bring him back." Trump said no, but they tried.
But yeah,
So in a world where people clearly voted for him and were willing to have that happen, since that was something he said he was going to do, in a world where no there is no big push like that, I don't see where people are just gonna all of a sudden, like,